I remember one day just pouring my heart out, saying, I'm ready to leave. I'm going to walk away unless you show me a sign right now. It's not that I don't believe, but the way that this is handled, this is just wrong. Those signs came immediately. I had some real concerns about the girls. They were both going down a path that I didn't want them to, and I felt such that weight on my shoulders. He said, it's not your job to save them. That's the Savior's job. And he's really good at what he does. Your job is to love them. And that was one of those pivotal, that's all I have to do? I can love them. That I can do. No one is ever shamed or shunned into coming back. That's only going to have negative consequences. What did the Savior do? I mean, he loved. As a parent, you have to do what is best for your children. And there are some painful moments on both sides.
Why don't you start by just telling us who you are and what you do?
So, Debbie Fleming, I am a single mom now. I have 6 children, lived all over. I've had several people this week ask me, where have you lived? And I just say, pick a state. And I've probably lived there. I've lived in a lot of different places. I actually have been married and divorced twice. I had 4 boys with my first husband, got divorced, married my second husband. He was a widower with 4 kids. And then a year after we got married, we moved to Florida and had 2 daughters together. So I've got 6 kids altogether. I'm just living in Utah now, just living the dream in Happy Valley, I guess. Although Utah wouldn't be my first choice of where to live, but this is where I am. And I'm kind of in the middle of several of my kids. So it works for now.
Yeah. Now, your first marriage, where did you live for the majority of that? Was that in Utah?
Yeah, so met him at BYU and got married there. Our 2 oldest sons were born in Provo. And then we moved to St. George, lived there for 7 years and got divorced there. And then when I got remarried, moved to California for a year. And then we moved to Florida and had the 2 girls there.
And how old were your kids when you got that first divorce?
So let's see. My oldest son was, 5, 6 maybe. My youngest was not quite a year old. The 4 boys. And I think there were probably about 6.5 years between the oldest and the youngest boy. And then there's 5 years between my youngest son and then my daughter, older daughter that I had.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. How do you think the divorce affected them at all, or were they so young?
I was so worried at the time because I really didn't have anyone that I knew who was divorced, which is funny because in that ward within a year, there were several couples that got divorced.
Hmm.
My parents still together. So I didn't have any real close association with people who were divorced. And of course, I was really worried. I was worried that their dad would just walk out of their lives and that would really affect them. That didn't really happen. And I got through it. Amazingly got through it, but it was horrible. It was horrible for me, but I was a stay-at-home mom and was able to continue to be a stay-at-home mom, which helped. So I was there. And I would say looking at my sons now, they've all been resilient and I can't really I take that back. One of my sons, I'll say, had a little separation anxiety when he was younger and has developed some anxiety as an adult, but he copes really well. And they've all been very successful and good in their relationships and good marriages. And they're all good fathers and parents. So, and then as far as my daughters, they kind of know some things about their dad. There was some things going on. So I had to get divorced. They understand, but it can't help but affect you if your parents get divorced or some of the things that went on. But again, I think that they've turned out all of them. I mean, some of them I want to, twist their little heads right off their necks and say, what are you doing? But I think they've all been very successful in what they're doing and various stages of maybe being on the path that I would choose for them. But as far as my sons, they're all active in the church, served missions, kind of done the things that as a parent would be important for me that they do.
It's funny. We have a group of friends that we travel with occasionally, and we went on a trip last year, and we were playing this game where you make a comment, and if it applies, you go across the circle and trade places with someone else. And someone was like, "Who has trauma from a parent's divorce?" And, several people traded places. And then the next person goes, "Who has trauma from parents who should have gotten divorced but never did?" And then a lot of people
Basically, everyone else traded
traded
places.
places. So I think, as
Yeah,
challenging as that was, I think it was probably good for your kids to see that you could advocate for yourself and that you were strong enough to stand up for yourself. So that was a lesson
yeah,
for them, even
yeah.
even though it was hard.
Yeah, I have had one of my sons in particular has mentioned that a few times. "Thank you, we know it was hard, but you did it," basically. So, yeah.
Regarding that first divorce, looking back, would you have done anything differently, like the timing of it or anything whatsoever with the benefit of hindsight?
Yes, I would not have married that particular spouse. It was really fast. BYU, first
Mhm.
date, temple marriage, 3 months, and I at the time, I just didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, and I think that really led to, "Well, I better take any chance I can, to get married." So and he and I, both of us were not the right person for each other. So that certainly would have been my number 1 if I could go back and do it again, just not have married him. Now, certainly I love my sons, and I would not change any of my sons. But yeah, I could have just focused on my husband more. He was kind of needed a lot of praise and adoration. And it's hard to constantly do that for someone else and never get it in return. But sure, I could have, done that more. And maybe there were things he has moved on, and his current wife, they seem very well suited for each other. So good for him.
Yeah. It's interesting how, when we all have big life trauma like that, and something good always comes of it. And we would never wanna trade the good stuff that came from it, right? I can think of a few
Absolutely.
experiences in my life where it's like,
Yeah.
people have asked me like, "What would you have done differently?" I wouldn't have partnered with that person, but the things that happened as a direct result of that trauma were beautiful and amazing, and
Right.
I wouldn't trade them. So you kinda
Right.
have to you can't just have one and leave the other. You kinda gotta
Right.
take them both.
Right. I think after it was 2 years then that I met my next husband. A friend was going to a singles conference at BYU. She was single, had never been married, and she just happened to come through town. I hadn't even seen her for several years, and she talked me into going to this conference, and then she backed out and didn't go, but I did go and then met my second husband there. I thought, "We can't ever go back and change what we've done." Because I married him, I ended up in Florida, and because I ended up in Florida, one of my sons met his future wife there, so he would not be married to a wonderful woman. Or another one of my sons had a tremendous, magical childhood growing up in Florida that he has
He's still
expressed
looking
many
for that
times.
for his own children.
That's
Yes,
Ryan.
yes.
Shout out to Ryan. Love you,
Yeah,
buddy.
yep,
He had a
that's
great
right.
childhood because he was friends with me,
Emmy,
Yeah, yeah,
mostly me.
yeah.
mostly you.
So you're right. I think that we can who was it that said nothing, was it Elder Holland? Something about no problem is so great that whining about it won't make it worse. Something like
Mhm.
that. We can
Yeah.
always find, and sometimes it just takes some time and perspective to see the positive. But yeah, I think one positive thing for me is that I really, like, after my first divorce, the single mom, I had no confidence in myself, no education, 4 little boys. I was, so overwhelmed with fear, but I really felt the Lord's hands around me. I mean, for a full year, I mean, really, I felt just guided and so, so blessed. I wouldn't trade those experiences.
Mhm.
If I could go back and have married someone different and still be married, that would be great, but that's not the way it was. And so you just go forward and, try to be positive.
I think that goes a lot with the culture of our religion. We wanna get married young. That is just
Yeah.
kind of the expectation. We got married at 22, which it felt older, but it's not at all. But I'm still so grateful I didn't get married right out of high school like I had
Yeah.
always hoped, because I got to figure out who I was and what I enjoyed. It was a great period of time to gain that self-confidence, because I do think that that is something that you need going into a relationship, like a solid foundation of who you are as an
Yeah.
individual. I think a lot of women, my mom included, suffered from getting married really young and really fast. So,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry that you went through that, but I'm
Well,
so grateful for
you
how
know,
things have worked out long term.
it is what it is. I was 20. My mom got married right out of high school. She was 17. And
Mine
I
too.
always, I think, add in my lack of confidence I had in myself and, oh my goodness, I'm 20. I'm almost an old maid. I better take
Right?
a chance, you know?
Crazy.
Like, boy, would I love to talk to that 20-year-old, go back,
Mhm.
but, you know,
And there's such a fine balance too, because the longer you wait to get married, the more your brain is developed and more you get set in your ways. And there's a lot of studies that show if two people get married young and like they're each like humble, humble, they try to be selfless and like communicate, it can be really beautiful because they
yeah,
grow together.
right.
Whereas if you wait until you're in your 30s, it's statistically speaking, you're gonna have a harder time finding someone that gels with you.
Yeah,
So you just
yeah,
gotta find that balance.
yeah,
And it takes two. It takes both
right,
people.
right. Yeah, I do think that no matter what age, I don't know that you need to, wait years after knowing someone, but certainly it would have helped for, like, my first marriage, well, both of them, for there to have been more time involved to really get to know each other, see each other under different circumstances. How does he handle stress? How do I handle stress? Let me see how he interacts with other people or how he interacts with children or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so 2 years in between the marriages, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then you moved to Florida. How did that first few years go with your second husband?
It went well. So he was a widower. His first wife had passed away a couple of years previously, and he did a really good job of making sure that his kids obeyed me, respected me. His youngest son was 2 years older than my oldest son. So he was a little bit older than me. So he did really well. He did really well interacting with my sons. I think things went really well. I did not know though until after we got divorced and it came up in a hearing that he was bipolar. And I thought, "Oh, that answers so many questions, so many just the way that he reacted to things." And but initially I think things went pretty well. The kids seemed to gel together well. I got along great with them. My boys got along great with them. Yeah. So it was well. Took a few years to kind of start unraveling.
Do you have any stories or examples of how that bipolar disorder would show itself? And when you know what I'm saying? Like when you heard about the diagnosis, you were like, "Oh, that's why he did this and that's why
Yeah.
he acts like that."
Yeah. So he would kind of swing back and forth between up all night getting work done. Uh, he was at the Chamber of Commerce, so he'd sometimes just spend the night there and get all this work done and just be, frantic. And then he would be just, I don't know, depressed, like he'd swing back the other way, depressed and very moody. And he seemed to be very sensitive about if I didn't pour all of the water off of the corn, it meant I don't love him, kind of a thing. So it ended up being just me walking on eggshells constantly, trying not to set him off and then, trying to balance being a mother and yeah, that divorce needed to happen. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But initially okay, but yeah.
And you had a couple awesome kids from that, right?
Yeah, 2 daughters that yeah, I would maybe choose again a different person to marry, but when I look at my those 2 daughters and I have 6 grandkids from those 2 daughters, yeah, that I wouldn't change.
About half of the time that I knew you growing up, you were with him, and then the other half of the time, you were in that other house as a
Yeah,
single mom.
yeah,
What was life like in that other house as a single mom?
yeah.
How did you make it work?
So, wow, I look back and I think how did like financially, how did I make that happen? Because I have no like degree. Oh, I can go back to being a nurse or, whatever. And I was really, really blessed. I ran a daycare in my home, and that was great, had great families. But then I also, because of another friend who was in the ward, she got me writing for the newspaper. And so I did that for a number of years, and that was great. That really was good to help me just develop confidence in myself and public speaking skills, etc. And a lot of that I could just do from home, phone interviews or arrange times where that worked out for me to go to different events or whatever. So I did that. I did get child support from my son's dad. So obviously, that helped out, but things worked out. They just seemed to work out. And I have to interject this too. I really believe in the strength, the power, the blessings that come from paying a full tithing and fast offerings. It'll be interesting when we get to the other side, and I'm hoping to have on my list of questions to answer, show me exactly how the math worked out, how did things work out? Show me what you specific blessed me with because I paid tithing, whatever,
Mhm.
but I do think that played a part in it. And we certainly didn't live in a mansion, but we never went without anything that we needed. So, it worked.
Yeah. Did you guys have any, like, righteous traditions that you think helped contribute to your kids succeeding in the gospel?
I think if and one of the questions that you had on here is one of my strengths. I think one thing that I can say about myself is a deep commitment to living the gospel. And with both my husbands, I feel like I kind of had to be the strong one. I had to make sure we all got up and went to church, had family home evening, such as it was, read scriptures, went to state conference. Whenever we went on trips, I would drive every summer from Florida out to Utah. The boys would spend their summers with their dad. So I always made sure that the trips involved, there's the Nauvoo temple that they're building. Let's go spend some time at the Nauvoo temple and take a family picture there. That we would, oh, there's Salt Lake Temple Square. Let's go visit that. Some of those things. And it's hard. It is hard to be committed and know I have to do A, B, C, and D, but I'm doing it all on my own. But, you know, at the end of the day, what really matters is those things. So when the boys were like in high school, we would have to read family scriptures before early morning seminary. And none of us are early morning people, but we did it. Some of the boys, you know, wrapped up in a blanket laying on the floor, but we did it. We did it. I've looked at other people kind of in my similar situation, and I thought, okay, why did all of my boys go on missions? Why am I still here and they're not? What's the difference? And that's the $64,000 question. I don't know. I know that from day one, I've had a deep commitment to the gospel. Never questioned. Always have loved doing those churchy things. And, like in Florida, one of my sons has mentioned many times how important like ward and stake leaders were to him. Because obviously a parent can't be everyone. It does take a village. And so there were some people who were so present and so important in their lives, good people that I would want my kids to look up to. And if you're going to hang around with someone, sure, go play basketball with a bishop on Tuesday nights, that kind of a thing.
Shout out to Hal Bandy,
Yeah, and others, Bishop Carlson,
and
and
many others. Bishop
yeah,
Hausman.
yep, yep, state leaders. So yeah,
Was there ever a time during those decades of consistency, right? Literally decades of consistency of bringing your husband to church, then your next husband to church, then your kids, and just push back, push back, push back, push back, push back. Was there ever a time where you seriously thought, maybe there's something to all these negative voices, right? Maybe, like, did you ever doubt what you were doing or yourself at any time?
never, never. Now there was one instance. So my second husband, we divorced when my youngest daughter was about 5, I think. He had served, both of my husbands served in bishoprics, and we were divorced. He baptized the older daughter when she became 8. She was like 7 when we got divorced. So then the younger daughter He was just crazy. He would not allow her to be baptized. She was 10 and a half when she was finally baptized. And I talked to the stake president and the bishop and others, and basically they were afraid that he was going to sue the church.
Mm,
We went ahead with the baptism. And I kept telling him he's not. He's just barking. You know, his bark is louder than his bite. He's not going to. But they were afraid. And that was at the time when my son Matthew was on a mission. And I said, explain to me how a single mom trying to provide for my family can come up with $400 a month to, so that my son in Peru can baptize people there, but the church is not interested in this
mhm.
insignificant little girl here. Anyway, eventually she was baptized, but I remember one day just pouring my heart out saying, I'm ready to leave. I'm going to walk away unless you show me a sign right now. It's not that I don't believe, but this is wrong. The way that this is handled, this is just wrong. And there were a couple things immediately that came. And I thought, I'm not willing to walk away with 4 children still at home because I know that it's true, but those signs came immediately. And again, it wasn't that I doubted. I just felt like the way that things were being handled was just not the way that they should have handled. But it gets back to my deep commitment. I'm just going to swallow whatever I need to swallow and show up at church every Sunday. And she was finally baptized. And, things turned out okay, even though she now doesn't want anything to do with the church. But at the time,
Yeah.
we got it done.
Eternity's a long time. She's got a long time to come around.
Well, in fact, I've got it on my phone. I love this quote by President Holland. And I've thought about this so many times because my sons are all active and my 2 daughters want nothing to do with the church. But he said, if those children are unresponsive, maybe you cannot teach them yet, but you can love them. And if you love them today, maybe you can teach them tomorrow. And I've thought about, I had an experience. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around here. I
No,
had an
this is
You're great.
great.
experience. I lived in Rexburg for 3.5 years. Older daughter had just graduated high school. My younger daughter still had 2 years left. So they were, older teenagers. And I had a home teacher who would faithfully come every month. And he knew I had some real concerns about the girls. They were both going down a path that I didn't want them to. And I felt such that weight on my shoulders. Like, how do I change this? How do I change them? What do I do? And he gave me a priesthood blessing. And basically he said, it's not your job to save them. That's the Savior's job. And he's really good at what he does. Your job is to love them. And that was one of those pivotal, oh, that's all I have to do? I can love them. That I can do. I think I'm a pretty nurturing, loving kind of person. And that's really been my focus, that they're not ready to listen or to come back now. But by golly, it's not going to be because their mom, doesn't love them
Yeah.
and doesn't love their children.
Yeah. That won't be the reason that they don't come back. Right. It
Right.
won't be me.
Right.
We're all prodigals. We just come back at different times.
I've talked to the boys and just to other people. No one is ever shamed or shunned into coming back. That's only
Doesn't
going to
work.
have negative consequences. If they come back, what did the Savior do? I mean, he loved. That's how he motivates and changes people, is just love. And sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out how to love people, but that's, at least in my case, that's a huge key.
Yeah. Now, from what I understand, and this might be just Titusville lore, but one of the big reasons you decided to move from Florida to Idaho is because one of your daughters wasn't, you weren't
Yes.
happy with how things were going.
Yes.
Can you,
Right.
can you speak
Exactly.
to that?
Yeah, I love Florida. I moved a lot growing up and lived in Florida about 17 or 18 years, longest that I've ever lived in one place. Absolutely loved everything about it. Friends, the ward, the schools, the things that I was involved in, Toastmasters and writing for the newspaper and, some of those things, some service projects that our ward did. Loved it. But yeah, I was really, really worried about my older daughter. I could see the path that she was going down, and I thought, "Not my daughter. Nope."
Was it friends? Like, not just
Yeah.
yeah, I don't need you to be
Yes.
specific, but she was
Yes.
just hanging with the wrong people
Yes.
and therefore making the
Yes.
wrong decisions?
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely the majority of it. And it's interesting because my parents came out every year, year and a half or so, and my dad called me on, like, a Tuesday and said, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. We'll probably go to the beach or something." He's like, "Well, your mom and I will be there Friday. We have something to talk to you about." Well, they had really been feeling like they needed to come out to convince me to come back out west. All my family,
Mhm.
them, they're all out west. And so I said, "Well, you caught me at the right time because I've been thinking a lot about that." So we did leave Florida, and it was extremely hard on that older daughter. She did not born and raised there. All of her friends, she had this boyfriend that was really the impetus for me to move. It was hard. I mean, I had to do everything to get her in that moving van, but as a parent, you have to do what is best for your children. And there are some painful moments on both
Mhm.
sides. But we did move to Colorado and lived with my parents for 2 years while I went to school. That was good and bad. It was great to have a place to live where I didn't have to worry about a mortgage. But my mom she's a very controlling person. And that was a difficult move for everybody, but, it allowed me to go to school, and then we moved to Idaho from there. And that daughter has a couple of times said, "Yes, I know I was getting out of control. It was good for me to get away from Florida." Florida, she still considers her home. That was hard. But I was alone out there as far as no other family out in the East. Everybody was Utah, Colorado, Texas, around here. So it ended up being a really good move, but, that was difficult.
I mean, 2 years is a long time to live with someone else, no matter
Yeah.
what the circumstances are, even if they're your
Yeah.
closest friends, right?
Yeah. It's hard for a woman to then live with another woman who wants to be the boss woman
Yeah,
when I've been
yeah,
the boss for a long time. But, we
yeah.
got through it.
Now, did you see any behavioral changes with your daughter when you were in Colorado?
So so it's really interesting because the older daughter was the one who was well, I tell people when I'm talking about her, she's a redhead, and just multiply every stereotypical thing you've ever heard about redheads times 100, and that's her. The younger one at the time was, "I wanna get my patriarchal blessing before we leave," and, just more like the obedient, and it's interesting because it didn't take too long before things really flipped. The older daughter really learned how to not manipulate, but kind of handle grandma to keep grandma
Mm,
happy. And the
mhm.
younger one, her kind of claws would come out because my mom's she's very type A, very controlling. "You're in my house. Even though it's your stuff, I will control it." And so that caused a lot of problems with the younger daughter. But, I explained to him, I have no other options. I
Mhm.
have to go to school, and I'm not one of these that can work full time and go to school full time. Just not. So we gotta just get through this year or 2, and then we'll be out, and you'll survive. People survive things.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like to go back to school in your
So,
40s, I imagine?
yeah, so when I was young, I went to Snow College for a year and then went to BYU, and I would look at everyone else getting A's and B's, and I would think, "I'm just stupid. I can't learn because 'cause I'm getting D's and flunking out of classes." Well, I'm not dumb. They study and they know how to study. And I just assumed I'll go to class
Mhm.
and then I might skim the chapter without really studying. I wish I could go back and do that over. So then when I'm, going back to school and it was just for an LPN certificate, I did well, like 3.9 GPA, but I studied and knew, I think I had a lot more. I've got to provide for myself and two girls. I have
Mhm.
to do this. I don't have the option to just peter out and not do this, or we will be living on the streets. Where I didn't have that responsibility when I was young, I just thought, "Oh, I'm just going to marry a return missionary and We're gonna live in a house with a white picket fence and things will be awesome. I don't need to study."
So you go to Colorado for 2 years, and the behavior kind of starts to reverse in the girls,
Right.
from what I
Right.
understand. Then you move to Rexburg, which, so just
Yeah.
to give the listeners some context, Titusville is probably like one of the hardest places to raise a kid in the gospel. It's about 1% are members of the church. It's
Yeah.
just, you got one ward of 50,000 people. And then you move to Colorado, which is somewhere in the middle, right? You've
Yeah.
got a lot more members, but its own challenges. And then you go to Rexburg, which has like the most
Yeah.
LDS density of anywhere on the planet. So
Right.
how do things change when you go to Rexburg, if at all?
Yeah. I think I had really high hopes because I thought, "Oh, there's gonna be a lot of great other girls my age, that will this will be great. The ward will have lots of youth." So in Colorado, Western Colorado, there were 5 girls and young women, 2 of them being my
Wow.
daughters. When we moved to
Wow.
Rexburg, we just happened to move into a ward right across the street from BYU, Idaho. So it was about 60% young married couples living in like basement apartments. So a lot of older people and a lot of young marrieds. And again, there were 5 young women in that ward, 4, either 4 or 5. By this time, my older daughter had graduated high school, but my younger daughter was there. So not very many young women. And she did okay. And then we had a young women's president, a new one. We'd been there about 5 or 6 months. And when we initially moved there, they were all young. The young women president and her advisors, they were all young and the daughter got along great. And then they changed and they were all a bunch of old ladies, like older than me. And I went to explain to the young women's president the day that she had been put in. I said, "Let me explain about this daughter. She's having some issues about the church and coming and being involved." And because she had been talking about personal progress. And I said, "She has an issue with personal progress." "Well, she'll just have to get over that because that's the program of the church." And I thought, "Well, can maybe you just call your activities something else instead of No, she's going to have to get over that." And I thought, "Lady, if you're really trying to drive my daughter out of the church, boy, you just did
Yeah.
it."
You're like,
So
maybe can we minister to the one, like the savior? I don't know.
yeah, anyway, I'm sure she was an inspired calling. I don't think she did anything positive for my particular daughter. And that wasn't the only reason. I mean, she was just kind of, the icing on the cake. So while I had high hopes and I loved Rexburg, in fact, if I could choose of all the places that I've lived, if I could choose one place to go back and live, it would be Rexburg, hands down. I just loved everything about it. I had 2 sons that graduated from the school there. Great, loved it. But for my daughters, it might not have been. But again, I gotta get a job. I've got to start making money. And my plan was to then go on to school there, continue, and that did not happen. I loved Rexburg. One of my daughters lives in Rigby, 10 miles from Rexburg now. Will probably live there for the rest of her life. But um, yeah. So that was Idaho.
Yeah. Now you had kind of an interesting parenthood, because I'm picturing like 3 or 4 different eras to your parenthood. There's like the Utah era, there's like the, second marriage, like the first part of the Florida era, the second part of the Florida era, right? After you
Yeah.
got divorced. And then there's like this short Colorado stint. And then there's like the last era, the Rexburg era.
Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
change or evolve as a parent across those eras, if at all? Did you change like how you approached your children or the gospel, or being strict or less strict, or how did you evolve over those timeframes?
Yeah, I don't know that I was became less strict. I think if I had to do it again, I think one of my big weaknesses is not being really good at explaining the why. No, we don't do that on Sunday, period, without
Hmm.
furthering it. And this is why. This is why.
Hmm.
So I think if I had to change it again, that's one thing that I would do. I don't think I'm real good at explaining things. It makes sense up here, but then getting it out my mouth is something completely, this jumbled mess.
Well, and the kids respond so much better when they understand why a rule is what it is.
Right. And they may not always agree 100%, but you're absolutely right. I think they have some understanding about, okay, why?
Yeah, I've been encouraging my kids to go to, like, think about going to BYU for college, but we take them to an Alabama game every year, and that's where we went. So they've always said Alabama, Alabama.
Mm,
And then they've always just kind of, like, pushed back against BYU, and then I distinctly remember I was in my son's room a year or 2 ago, and I just told him, I'm like, "Listen, I think BYU would be better because I think you'll have a better shot at staying in the church because it's hard at Alabama, it's tough." And, like, I could see the light bulb go off. I could just see it. And from then on, the conversation was just different. It
yeah,
wasn't like, "For sure, I'm going to BYU now," but it was just like, they understood, and they were starting to seriously consider it for the first time
yeah.
ever, you know?
I think one way that I've changed, and it's easier to make this change as my children have now, adults, gotten married, is just that control. You wanna have that control, which you pretty much have when your kids are little. You control what they eat, what they wear, where they go, when they sleep, that kind of stuff. And it's an adjustment to kinda let go of that. When we lived in Colorado with my parents, I told the girls, church is at 9 o'clock, and my van is leaving at 8:45, and it's your job to get yourselves up and out to the and there were a couple of times where it's 8:45, and they weren't out there, and I didn't hear them moving around in their rooms, and I left. One time, I went to church and sacrament meeting and then went into primary where I was in primary, and then halfway through, here comes my 2 daughters, really angry, and I said, "You're here. How did you get here?" "Grandma called us." She just reamed them out and said, "I will be there in 10 minutes. Get yourselves ready now," without ever discussing it. And so I talked to her later and I said, it's got to be their decision. I can't be there
Mhm,
every single Sunday for the rest of their lives to tell them, get out of bed. They have to learn to make that decision on their own. And if they decide not to, that's their decision. It's not going to be because I haven't taught them. But at some point, you have to let go of that control. And hopefully, I've done a good enough job teaching them that they'll decide to. Now, those 2 girls have not decided to yet, but I'm holding on to what Elder Holland says that,
mhm,
if I love them now, maybe they'll be open to it later.
I think that's a really great point. I think agency as a parent is a really hard concept to accept, allowing our children to make decisions like that on their own. But I also think it's important for us to give them opportunities to make those decisions while they still live in our homes. I don't know what the right balance is. Like if your girls had chosen like multiple weeks in a row to not go, would you have
Yeah.
stepped in? Or I, it's so
Yeah.
tricky to know
Yeah.
what the right thing is.
Yeah. I do think when, kids, you're living in my home, and I understand that you might have some differing opinions, but right now, I'm the parent and I'm responsible, and so this is what we do. But I also think that you can't be so lax and will just do whatever you want without having taught them principles ahead of time. I mean, that's so important. The things that are just those primary answers. We go to church, we pray, we read scriptures, we try to come together for a gospel discussion every once in a while. We look to the temple. All of those things you try to do, but in the end, they're going to make their own decisions. But you have to have, and none of us. I mean, I'm looking back. I would not give myself an A+. I don't know what I'd give myself, but thankfully there's grace, and thankfully there's a savior who is really good at what he does.
mhm. If you could go back in time, would you do anything differently in your parenting? Would you be more strict or less strict, or do you think it was just about right?
I think I would not have lost my temper when kids weren't doing what I thought they should be doing.
How do you do that, though?
I
How do you do
no,
that? Tell me, teach me, please.
you tell me that too. Count to 10. So when my redhead was in middle school, I think she was in about 8th grade, and I was writing for the newspaper. Have you heard of Love and Logic?
Mhm,
Okay. So a lady came and did a presentation. I was writing for a paper, an article about that. So I went, but I also talked to her afterwards because I personally had a child that I was really struggling with here. But one of the things that she said is you have a couple of phrases and you say those and you keep repeating them and you do not ever lose control. You are calm and quiet. And so this daughter, she would just be losing it, and I would say, "Alicia, I love you too much to argue. No matter what she'd say, I love you too much to argue. Or the other phrase was, I will discuss this with you when your voice is as calm as mine. I will discuss this with you when your voice is as calm as mine. Which she would get more angry because she wanted a reaction out of me. So then she was justified in her reaction. And it's really hard to maintain that calm when inside I wanted a baseball bat. Come close. Let me at you. I love you too much to argue. And we laugh about it now. She's like, you have no idea how mad that made me. I said, yeah, I have an idea. And it's tough to always be loving and kind and think, how would the Savior act and react in this situation? We're not perfect, but it's amazing to me how children come through and can be successful with very imperfect parents.
Mhm. That's for sure. Did you ever see things in your boys that really worried you about their long-term future in the church that ended up being
No,
not
with the
true?
boys, no, not at all. Like I said before, if it was a Tuesday or Thursday, Tuesday meant, volleyball at the church with, the bishop, and then Thursday was, ping pong with Bishop Carlson at the church, or
Mhm.
out of the church ranch with, stake leaders and other kids. At that time that they were growing up, we had wonderful group of young men and young men leaders. So they really had a lot and most of the young men like went on missions and didn't do drugs, that kind of thing. So with the boys, one son had moved to his dad's right after high school, and then he decided to stay here. His dad lived in Logan, Utah, and he decided initially not to go on a mission. And I talked to him. I think he had a girlfriend or something. And he's like, I can still be a good person and not go on a mission. And I said, yeah, of course you can be a good person. I would hope no matter what, you would always be a good person. But he ended up coming back to Florida and ended up going on a mission. I never, other than that, I really never worried about the boys, all of them. All of them, drugs or tattoos or hanging out with the wrong crowd was just never issue. Where that definitely was an issue with the girls. And I don't know if maybe they had been boys, things had been different. I don't know.
Now, you might have been worried about me when you found my Red Hot Chili Peppers album at your house, but I wasn't your son, so that didn't
I
count.
remember something about that. I don't remember all the details. I
It's fine.
think one thing that really, really helped, like that time in Florida, it was pre-cell phone. We rarely had cable TV. The only time we ever had like TV was when, once a year they'd have like a 2-month special, $5 a month, and then, you
Mhm.
know, we'd get our TV watching in, and then, we lived in a big house, so there's lots to do outside and not social media and always on the phones and, stuck in front of playing video games, that kind of stuff. I'm really glad because I see a couple of my grandsons now, like he's only 6 years old and addicted to Minecraft or whatever it is. I'm glad that I was able to raise my kids before all that
Yeah,
nonsense.
we have different challenges. Maybe not better challenges, but different for sure.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. We didn't live in Titusville for that long, but we lived there a couple times, and I just remember you were a constant at the church building. You were always the pianist in sacrament meeting, or, you were just always there, always positive. I remember you bearing a testimony a long time ago. I wanna say it was probably your older daughter, like, she left a toy out in the yard, and you'd asked her repeatedly to go pick it up, and she said she couldn't do it, and she needed your help, and you just kept asking her to do it, and so you're like, "Okay, I'll come watch." And she went out, and she got the big toy, and as long as you were watching her, she was fine with carrying it back by herself. But I thought that that was a really good example of, like, you were firm, you did not intervene, but you did support her in bringing it back. I don't remember the point of the testimony, but I just loved how you were there for your daughter in the way that she needed you. She still accomplished the task that you had given her. You didn't back down. But I think that was such a great parenting moment. I think we can all learn from that, like giving our kids assignments and not fixing it for them, not backing down, but providing the support that they need to accomplish it.
Yeah, I have no memory of that at all. Oh, but that reminds me what President Nelson said, "The Lord loves effort." And I've thought about that a million times when it's a Saturday morning, and I usually go to the temple on Saturday mornings. I work full time. I just wanna sleep in, and then that the Lord loves effort, get up, put my dress on, go to the temple. There was someone years ago in that ward who said she talked about she didn't wanna be the weak link, and I've thought about that so many times too, like, just with my children. I would never want to be the reason that my kids walked away. I have to be strong because for myself, but for my kids, I got
Mhm.
6 kids. I got 17 grandkids now. I wanna be the strong link there and never be that weak link. I haven't had many what I call Moroni moments where, an angel comes and I have revelation that's so strong, but I've had enough very strong impressions and guidance that I can't deny it. And if it's true today, it's going to be true next week. And whatever challenges I have between now and then, well, it's still true. And I still need to put forth the effort. I always wanted my kids to see that. Even if I was tired, I'm going to the temple tonight. Or, yeah, you stayed out too late last night. We all did. Well, we're still going to get up and go to church. Do what is right, no matter what. At the end of the day, we'll be glad that we slept in and we're lazy, or are we going to be glad that we put forth the effort to do
That was
what we're
gonna be
supposed
my
to do?
question. Like, you are a strong person, you're a rock for your family. That gets exhausting, but holding on to those spiritual experiences that you've had is where you gain your strength. What else do you rely on? Or do you ever find times where you do wanna just sleep in? Or how do you fill your own cup, I guess?
Yeah, it's been interesting, kind of the phase of life that I'm in now, where I live alone, so none of my kids are right here. They don't know if I get up and go to church or go to the temple or whatever, and so I play the organ like once or twice a month. There's a few of us that rotate. And it's really funny because on the weeks that I don't play, I'm like, I could just stay in bed. I could probably text someone for the Zoom link and just stay in my pajamas on the couch. And that's kind of funny because when I was young, I thought, I can't wait till I grow up because I won't ever have any desire to do anything wrong or bad. It'll just be easy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. In a lot of ways, it's harder now because I don't have that example of like my kids right here that I have to be the strong one, make sure we all do it. Having a calling in the ward really, really helps. I've had a couple of times where 6, 8 months or something, I haven't had a calling. And I really noticed I'm the type of person, I need to have an extra reason. I know it's true. I want to be there, but when I stayed up too late on Saturday night and early church, I need an extra reason to get there. So that has kind of surprised me about myself. But I try to just remember that the Lord loves effort, do those things that I need to do. And if I don't have a Moroni moment, if Moroni doesn't come and pat me on the back, well, it was still the right thing to do. It was still a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, Debbie, do you have any closing words of wisdom for parents listening right now? Any tips or tricks you'd give them, advice?
I tell people, and this is joking, just don't have kids. It's too
Uh,
hard. But I'm kidding. It's such a the thing that probably brings me so much joy is seeing my children become parents and seeing them parent and seeing them raising their kids in the gospel. Don't stress. You got to pick your battles. You got to decide that line in the sand. This is what I can kind of put up with. These are things that just can't go on. And, love. It's such a simple thing, but really love. And you're going to have to love each child in a different way. I love each of my daughters in different ways, or my sons, but be strong, of a good courage. You can do it. You can do hard things. It's worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever effort we put in as being a parent, teaching our children what is right, what is wrong, being that example, being the strong link. End of the day, when we climb into bed, we're never going to say, boy, I wish I I wish I hadn't gone to church today. I wish I
Mhm.
caught up on Netflix during that time or whatever it is. It's worth it. It's all about family and it's all about loving them.
I agree.
Definitely. Thank you.
This was perfect, Debbie. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for everything.
I'm happy to have done this and I look forward to you guys doing your own podcast about, your lives and your parenting. I would love that.
That one will be entitled The Perfect Parents,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Well, it was great to talk to you guys. Yeah.
You too. Thank you for taking time for this.